I'm going to share with you guys 3 powerful deadlift programming strategies so that you guys can maximize your benefits from training the deadlift. Hi, my name is Nick Hedayatpour, also known as the Strength Artist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And in this video, we're just going to talk about some strategies when it comes to deadlift programming. Deadlift is probably one of the few exercises in the gym that engages the most amount of muscle mass. So training the deadlift can be a little bit tricky because of the fact that your recovery curve is a lot longer, and you want to make sure that it's not affecting the performance of your other sessions so that you guys can perform well across many different exercises in your training week. Now, of course, I'm not going to talk about just the context of powerlifting. I'm going to talk about like a general population trainee who just wants to be strong in many different exercises. And of course, if you're a powerlifter, this may apply to you as well. Now, if you talk to any powerlifting coach or powerlifter who's successful, you will see that they will always tell you that training the deadlift is hard. It's actually harder to recover from the deadlift, whether it's a training session or a training cycle, as opposed to any other lift. So it's important for us to understand when is the best time and the frequency to program the deadlift, and that's exactly what I'm going to share with you guys today. The first strategy that I want to show you guys is that, in my opinion, if you're doing an upper lower body split for whatever goal, whether it's hypertrophy or strength development, it's best to train the deadlift as the last training session of the week. So for example, let's say you're doing upper body 1 on Monday with the focus of overhead press. Tuesday would be a back squat, Wednesday off, Thursday would be, let's say, a bench press session, and your Friday session could be potentially the deadlift session, and Saturday and Sunday off. Now, there are 4 reasons why you would want to train the deadlift as the last training session of the week. Reason number 1 is that the deadlift engages the most amount of muscle mass. So the neural demand is very high because of the fact that you also have much greater potential to load this exercise as opposed to the bench press or back squat, front squat, or chin up, or any lift in the gym for that matter. So since the potential for loading is very high, and the fact that deadlift engages the most amount of muscle mass, you have what we call a systemic fatigue and neural demand, which is greatly increased through this exercise. So if you want to recover well from it, you want to make sure that you allocate adequate time for recovery. So if you train a deadlift on a Friday, you have you actually have 2 full days of recovery, which is the Saturday and Sunday, which would be ideal for you guys to keep performing well in the upcoming session. So that's one of the reasons why you need to perform the deadlift as the last training session of the week. The second reason is that if you were to train the deadlift earlier in the week, due to the neural demand as well as the systemic fatigue, it will have a negative carryover to your other training sessions, even if it's not a lower body session, because systemic fatigue affects your whole body and any lift, not just lower body lifts. So for example, if on a Tuesday you do a hard deadlift workout, then your session on Thursday and Friday will be affected. Reason number 3 is that the deadlift engages the low back to a great extent, and low back is involved in many exercises. So for example, in the instance that I shared with you guys earlier, overhead press was performed on a Monday session. Okay, so let's say you decided to do your deadlift earlier in the week, so on a Monday or on a Tuesday, and your next session of the week was an overhead press. But because of the fact that you only rested 1 day between the sessions, or less than 24 hours between the deadlift session and an overhead press session, and we know that the limiting factor of overhead press is low back and trunk stability. So if you're going to go into that session with a lot of low back fatigue, the performance of your overhead press is going to be negatively affected. Reason number 4 is that, once again, the low back is involved to a great extent in the deadlift, but you also need to remember that the low back is involved in many other exercises for both upper and lower body. So whether you're doing assistance exercises or remedial exercises, which are, the part of the program so that they help you to increase the performance of your classic multi-joint exercises. And even though you're not going to be lifting too heavy in those exercises, you still want to make sure that you're not going into those sessions with too much low back fatigue, because it's going to negatively affect the performance of those remedial and assistant exercises, such as bend over row variations, RDLs, all the hip extension movements. And that means that your recovery curve is going to be longer, and that's just going to have a negative effect on your classic exercises. Now, it's important to mention that there is obviously a time and a place to do deadlifts earlier in the week, or you might even increase the training frequency of the deadlift, which is something that successful powerlifters do, because of the fact that the technical aspect and movement rehearsal of the deadlift is so important, because it's the main lift of the sport. So obviously for a powerlifter that does make sense, but remember that once again, I'm just giving you the context of a general population trainee who wants to be strong across many different lifts. Strategy number 2 is that, in my opinion, the maximum number of reps you should do for the deadlift should be 6 repetitions. Every exercise in the gym has a purpose. Some exercises are there to increase your power, like throwing exercises, jumping exercises, Olympic weightlifting variations. Some people are there to make you stronger, like deadlift, bench press, overhead press, chin-ups, and many other exercises. Some of them are there to improve your structural balance, like remedial exercises. And some are there for strength endurance purposes, right? So in my opinion, deadlift is just not an exercise that responds well to high repetition training. And that's obviously my opinion. And here is the reason why. The more complex an exercise is in terms of technique and execution, and the higher the postural demand of the exercise, which is obviously the case of deadlift as well, or things like front squat or snatch, clean and jerk variation, the lower the repetitions should be. Charlie Francis, which was a legendary track coach, said that never increase the quantity of stimulus at the expense of quality. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Deadlift, or any exercise for that matter in the gym, should be done with high quality. And if you guys pay attention to high repetitions of deadlift, and of course this is not the case for everyone, but when people start to push past 6 reps, it's just going to be much harder for you to keep a neutral back and keep your neck into a good position, or keep the right amount of tension, which is not really optimal when it comes to the risk to reward ratio with this exercise. So I recommend to keep it maximum of 6 if you're doing a cycle where you're pushing for volume, where you're accumulating volume. Now, of course, let's say for example you're doing a mesocycle where the intensity of the A series exercises, just as an example, is 70%, which equates to 10 to 12 repetitions on multi-joint exercises for most people. Now, how do we balance that out in terms of volume? What if your bench press and overhead press or squat, you're doing 10 to 12 reps? What about the deadlift? Now, here's a tip that I have for you guys. You still keep the repetitions at 6 reps, done with a weight which is 70% of 1 RM. But in order to make up for the volume, you don't increase the reps, but rather increase the number of sets. So in this example, if let's say you're doing 3 sets of 10 to 12, which is about 30 to 36 repetitions in total, you would try to match the same thing with the deadlift. So you would keep it at 6 reps. So 5 to 6 sets of 6 reps, which is equal to 30 to 36 repetitions. In my coaching practice, when I begin to teach a beginner how to do the multi-joint exercises, the tempo that I like to implement is 4-0-1-0, which means 4 seconds down, no pause at the bottom, 1 second up, and no pause at the top. And of course, there's many variations of tempo that you could use for various goals. But if you're just doing regular practice of the lift, a 4-0-1-0 tempo is ideal. And of course, as they get more advanced and they know how to keep the right tension and body posture when they're doing the lift, then I will include an X, which stands for explosive, in the concentric range. But when it comes to deadlift, at least in my practice, I don't find this to be effective. So what I like to do with the deadlift is to use a tempo of 4 1 1 0, which means 4 seconds down, 1 second pause at the bottom, 1 second up, and no pause at the top. And of course, that's just one variation of the tempo. But if you're doing the regular deadlifts just to practice the movement, then that's something that I recommend. Now, there's 2 points to that. The first one is the pause at the bottom. Why do we need to pause at the bottom? Well, deadlift, as the name suggests, it's a dead plus lift. Dead lift. So every rep, you're trying to overcome the inertia. And remember that keeping posture in the deadlift is much trickier as opposed to some other exercises like the squat or bench press, for example. So you want to make sure that you take that 1 count to reset and recreate tension in the body to be able to lift with optimal posture. Now, of course, there might be a time and a place for touch and go deadlift, even though I don't use it in my practice, but there's many lifters and good coaches that have used it with great success. Personally, it doesn't work for me, but I think there is a time and a place for that. But for most of you at the beginning of your lifting career, I recommend you to take that 1 second pause at the bottom. Now, the second point is that when you want to bring the weight up, especially for a beginner, I recommend you to take about 1 to 2 seconds on the way up. If you look at some of the most successful weightlifters and powerlifters, when they're doing the first pull of the deadlift, that bottom third, they're very patient with the lift. They're not trying to rip the bar off the floor. And if you try to rip the bar off the floor, the problem with that is that if you're not experienced enough, you will end up losing tension in your body. Your body posture is not going to be good, and you will see many examples on YouTube when people try to, rip the bar off the floor, that they end up having a very rounded back and they end up missing the lift at the top. So you want to make sure, at least for the beginning of your training journey, you're patient up until the knee level, and then from there you can have that powerful hip drive or triple extension if you're using that for Olympic weightlifting variation. Okay, so you want to make sure that you do your deadlifts for 4 1 1 0 tempo, and of course, as you get more advanced, you might be able to take advantage of explosiveness. Now, of course, there's some people that can do explosive deadlifts while keeping good posture, but that's probably not for you guys at the beginning of your training journey. That's it, guys. 3 powerful programming strategies when it comes to the deadlift. Make sure you implement them right away into your training. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.